Hello and welcome back. I hope you had a good weekend and you're enjoying the videos. What? You can't hear me? Of course not. Let me take this off. Ah,
Oh, I hope everybody in your house is healthy and wealthy and staying fine. Please be careful out there. It's really not a joke. I kid around about it. I guess you have to laugh. Which way you look? Like that way? Okay. Yeah, you like that way. You got to laugh about some things. You still have to keep it kind of light. I know it's a little difficult. I'd like to say, first of all, I'd like to thank all you guys for being putting up with this videos and the video teaching for this time being. I know it's difficult and it's not what you signed up for. I know you want it to be in the classroom, and I tell you, I want to be in the classroom. All the teachers want to be in the classroom. We want this to be back to normal, and we're really having a problem because of this. So please be patient. Please study. The information the teachers give you is valuable. It is valuable, that's for sure. I just wanted to get in the kitchen because obviously last video, making the stocks and stuff, I was really happy with that. And they came out really good. But I can't let you guys, there's no way you guys can taste it. And that's not what it's about. It's really, cooking is about smelling and touching and tasting. And it's very difficult to do this way. But once again, this is what we have to do at this time. We really don't have any choice. Okay? So once again, please be patient. This should pass. We get going. We're moving on. So speaking of moving on, let's talk about what we talked about last week. Previously on Western Cooking Freshman Edition, right? What did we talk about? We talked about the 7 menus, and that's one of your homework in there. Your homework's in there. Which Korean style? What style menu is Korean menus? Right. I'm not talking about I'm talking about traditional Korean food. Okay, not Isaac toast or something like that. I'm talking more of a traditional menu. What is that out of the 7? Service styles. We're talking about that. And once again, what service style is served in Korea? How that? Which number is that from 1 to 7? About it. Okay, that was your homework, and then you send it to me by email. Everything by email. Please, I got already some email from students, which we'll talk about later. What else did we talk about? Well, we talked about terms, cooking terms, which we're going to do more today. We're going to do, once again, this is not an English class, but all these cooking terms mostly are French anyway, so we're going to be going through that kind of stuff. We're going to be doing that, but we talk like cut up. What do you cut? You cut vegetables. You cut meat, you can cut yourself. You can cut a lot of things. Chop up. What do you chop up? Parsley. Chop up vegetables. Chop up herbs. That's chopping is how we used one, right? Slice. What do you slice in the kitchen? Usually you slice bread. You can slice turkey, or a slice of roast beef and things like that. But slice is kind of limited. And a student talked about grating. To grate. We grate potatoes. We make potato pancakes. We grate cheese, that kind of thing. What do you grate in Korean cooking? And he told me it was like radish. Like when you make mugu, you grated that. Another thing, ginger and garlic. Garlic's not really, that's more chopped than anything else. But still, grating is quite pretty common in all cuisines, not just Western cooking. So it has a similar term. What else do we do? Stocks, which we talked about. We did chicken and beef stock. What kind of beef stock? Brown beef stock. Once again, don't get that confused. That's part of one of those families, right? Brown stock, white stock. The reason why I choose brown stock is that's what you're going to see 99% of any kind of beef or veal is generally browned. So that's why we're going at that point. The chicken stock, I focus on that all the time. Always in class, always talk about chicken stock, because first of all, you'll see when we do get into the kitchens, we're going to be making chicken stock, using the chicken stock to make soups, making sauces. Once again, without a good stock, you don't have a good sauce, that's for sure. And if we have time, we'll make some beef stock. We'll maybe do some demi-glace. We'll see how that goes. Once again, sachet de spice. My sachet de spice. Some recipes are a little different, right? Garlic, peppercorns, bay leaf, parsley stems, and thyme sprigs, right? Those 5, that's mine, right? And I said rosemary sometimes they added a lot in chicken stock. You don't want to overpower these. The aromats, it's another term from aromats. Sachet de spice, I just use in class. We keep one simple term, sachet de spice. That gives it a lot of flavor to it at the end. How long do you cook it for? 1 hour, right? Same thing with the mirepoix, carrot, celery, and onions. 50% onions, 25 carrots and celery. Easy enough. Ratios are very important to me. Recipes aren't, but ratios. Maybe you make 1 liter of stock, you make 20 liters of stock. The ratio stays the same, 50, 25. Easy enough that way. Once again, the mirepoix doesn't really change. I've never seen any variation except for white stock for fish. But once again, we'll get to that when we start talking about fish cooking and things like that. Rinse the bone, combine the bones with water, right? Bring it to a boil for sanitation reasons. Reduce it to the heat to a slow simmer. And that's, once again, if you remember in the video, that was just going, boop, 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 because you're going to jody that down. You're going to cook it down. You're going to add water. Now, at school here, we have sangsu. We have no good water. But if you're like with Seoul, where there's a lot of medicine, yak, like chlorine in the water, you reduce down, you add more, you reduce down. You're going to start getting this metal flavor. And it's really not a good thing. Plus, we use aluminum pots. So you want to really cook gently, okay? Skim as needed. Obviously, you saw that too with skimming. And you don't want to take the stock off. You just want to take the fat, which is the big difference between Western stocks and Korean stocks. If you're making sonentang or you're making galbitang or anything, you boil it really hard. You keep the fat basically homogenized, almost like making a mayonnaise in a way. That's why Korean stocks are white, is because the fat is incorporated into it. That's part of that style. Now, when I first had like Korean style stocks, to me it tasted soapy. I didn't. Now I understand where it comes from, and I kind of like it now. But when I first had it, it's like, this tastes off because of the oil that's incorporated into it. Once again, what we're learning here, we're not only learning about food, we're learning about culture, and food and cuisine and culture. It's very important to understand that. That's why we simmer. We want a clear stock. It has a different flavor. Okay? After that skimming, right? Skimming up for how many hours? 3 hours. But we're talking chicken stock right now. Okay? If we talk beef stock, how many hours simmering? 4 to 8. 6 to 8, really. But okay. At least up to 8. And then you add the mirepoix the last hour. This one, we're talking chicken. 3 hours. Then we're going to add the mirepoix and the sachet de spice, which we talked about. Now you simmer that again. Now what I usually do is, a lot of restaurants, I add the vegetables, I bring it to a boil again, I cut it down. You'll see in the video I did that too. That's because vegetables themselves can have bacteria attached to them. You know, cutting board can be dirty, whatever. No harm in it. Bring it to a boil, back down to a simmer. You can't do any wrong by doing that, that's for sure. You can do wrong by cooking it too long, because I told you the carrots themselves will just disintegrate and give you a pink kind of stock, a rosy pink stock, which once again you don't want. You want a nice, well, you saw it. It's like kind of like a yellowish color, you know, whitish yellow color. The stock came out really, really good. Both stocks came out really good. I really wish we could share with that. Q&A. I got some messages from you guys. One student asked about notebooks, and I'm going to look at my notes here because I got to make sure. Your notebook can be in Korean. You can write in Korean. There's no problem with that at all. But the recipes I give you are going to be in English. So if you want to translate it into Korean, that's fine with me. I don't care. But at test time, 80% of the test, 85% of the test is in English. Not we got a pop-up here. Back. Boink. I had a little technical difficulty. Don't worry about it. 80% of the test is going to be in English. That's for sure. Now, there's going to be certain things we're going to I'll put in all the tests, too. They're usually true, false, fill in the blanks. It's not an English class. That's the whole thing. Even today, we're going to be talking a lot about the cooking terms in English, but I do have some Korean answers for you, so we understand we're talking about the same thing. But when it comes to test time, in the first video, once I go back to that about how testing goes, right? You have to have complete answers. They have to be spelling's not important. Now, if I understand what you're trying to write, that's fine with me. It's like I said, grammar's not important, spelling's not important. Information's important, right? But if you write an answer in pure Korean, if I ask how to make chicken stock, you write it all in Korean. I can't read that. I'm sorry. I wish I could. And I can't bring it to another teacher and say, please do that, because trust me, they grade very difficultly. So once again, you can write your notebooks in English, in Korean, that's for sure. But you have to think by languages. Another one about homework. You have homework every class. Every class. Now, I asked about the menu style. That was something you're supposed to send me by email. But your notebook, every class, you should be breaking a notebook from the videos. That is your homework. That is your homework. A student asked me about that. And that's part of your homework. And I can collect your notebooks. Once again, at the end of the semester, I can collect your notebooks to see if you did do your homework. Okay, so once again, I told you in the beginning that a written notebook will last you forever. A cell phone won't, that's for sure. A student asked me the difference between stock and a broth. Apparently, he had a teacher that always used the term broth for stock. And the difference between a stock is made from bones and vegetables and sachet de spice, where a broth is made from meat, bones, vegetables, sachet de spice, or just meat, sachet de spice, and mirepoix. Not necessarily bones, but that's the difference between broth and stocks. And a broth is obviously a much more expensive item if you think about cooking just with meat, that's for sure. If you do go to gomtam, that's a broth. You're not making a stock because there's a lot of meat on the tailbones. But if you're doing the solentang, I think it's made out of just the bones. I'm not sure, but that's just a stock. So once again, that was a good question. That was a good question. Another student asked about sweating. And so if you look at the dictionary, and I guess that's what he did with Google search or whatever, you translate sweating is dumb. But it doesn't make sense in cooking. It's once again, it's a pure sweating in the kitchen is a pure cooking term, and that's when you cook things with just a light. You don't give it any color. You just get the smell out of it. Onions, they're white. When you cook them lightly, they kind of turn clear. We call that translucent. Right? So when you're sweating onions, you cook them until they're translucent, but you're not making them brown, unless the recipe calls for that. But then the recipe would say brown onions. Brown, right? So you wouldn't do that. But if it says sweat onions and garlic, I mean, it's just cook lightly until you get the nemse, then you get the garlic, and then you're done. Generally, at that point, you deglaze. Because once you have burnt garlic, I think you guys know what that tastes like. That tastes really bad. So you don't cook the garlic that much in Korean. You don't saute it, at least. It's usually thrown into liquid, so you never really burn it. But if you want to try something, burn a piece of garlic and taste it. It is really, really bad. So you'll understand the sweating about that. The last question was, all excused absences must be cleared with the professor. Obviously, cyber classes here. There's no reason why you can't watch these, that's for sure. When we're in cooking class, I said it's very important to clear class time with me so I don't order you a chicken or I don't order you vegetables or eggs or whatever we're going to be using that day, because once again, it is your money and I'm very careful about your money. And I don't want to order 16 chickens when only 13 students show up because it costs money. Because what's the chef's #1 job? Make money. That is our job. That is our job. We cook good food, we prepare good food, we manage our people, we run our kitchens. We have to turn a profit. And you guys have to understand that in all your classes. When you're in my class or when you get a job, if you're a chef that can't make money, nobody's going to want you. That's for sure. Okay? Once again, send me any other questions you have. Thank you very much for the ones that you did. They're good questions, too. The broth and stock. That was an interesting one. I assume that student probably went to a hagwon or something. I'm not sure, because he or she, I'm not sure, had a good depth and good English in their question. Okay, please once again send emails to me if you have questions, and I will address them each one. we're going to be moving on next to another subject, so hold on. I'm in this little fishbowl here. Doink, doink, doink. Doink, doink, doink. Doink, 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 doink. Anyway, I hope you understand everything that we talked about before and reviewed. Review is very important about it, learning about what we're going over. Just don't watch the video. Try to understand it, and if you do have questions, please write me. That's fine. I'm more than happy to help you that way. As you can see now behind on the big screen here, I have English and actually a lot of French terms with some Korean definitions in there to make it easier. Okay, so I want you to take a minute now to write down the adjust as needed and bake. Write down the definitions for it, and we'll talk a little about that. Gee, I don't know how long. How we're going to do this, right, is I'm going to give you the words to do. You, meaning the students, pause the video, stop it for a second, copy that down, and then when you click the button again, I'll start talking in English about these things so we both understand what's going on, okay? So right now, pause it. No, you don't. Okay, we're back, okay? Adjust. A lot of times you go to the internet, you look up the recipes, and they say adjust seasonings. Generally, 99% adjust seasonings means salt and pepper. It doesn't really mean other ingredients per se. But you can adjust consistency, which once again we'll talk about that word before, is the thickness. Obviously, your mother, when she's making gochujang, if it's too thick, she's going to add some water or cider to it to thin it out a bit. That's adjusting. Adjusting means to make things a little more equal, okay? Another term is as needed. And as needed, there's not a measurement to as needed. There's no spoon that says as needed. It's not a teaspoon, tablespoon. It's, once again, cooking is an art. It's not a science. So sometimes you're going to have to add a little flour as needed, a little pepper as needed. It's a skill that you'll learn as needed is a very important thing. Baking, once again, we talked about baking before a little, not that much. It's a dry cooking method. Do you bake beef? No, you bake breads, you bake cookies. Now, menu copy, what sometimes on menu is called baked chicken. It's about the only thing that's really when it comes to baking that's used for meat items. Usually baking is usually pastry, flour-based type of things. Okay? Pause. Okay, we're going to do blanch, breading, and brunoise. Once again, I want you to pause your video, copy down the methods, and then we'll get back. Blanched. Okay. Blanching is a wet cooking method that's once again done with water. You blanch a lot in Korean cooking. I notice you have like nangi or suk or shigumshi. You know what it's funny. Shigumshi spinach. I think you know that. Once again, we'll talk probably more about terms, but I think you know basically most of these terms anyway. But like nangi is suk is mugwort in English, which is a horrible name, and we don't really eat that. Nangi is another thing. It's springtime. The reason why I use those examples, it's spring now. There's nangi and guk in the market. But usually when you eat those things, you make a side dish, you blanch it. And blanching is in hot boiling water for a short time, and then generally cooled quickly. In the West, usually blanch is always done with salt. Always done with salt. Korean cooking, I'm not sure. Bread or breading. Breading is a coating. Bread is the product. Obviously, you know what bread is, right? And breading is bangaru, right? It does, and that's used a lot. Once again, in frying, even baking, roasting things, cordon bleus, chicken coating, things like that. We use that. Brunoise. Brunoise is a knife cut. Once again, we talked about knife cuts before. It's not a chop. That's a misnomer. Misnomer means people don't really get that right. Right? It's you make a very fine julienne, and then you cut it into a very fine dice. And it's not chopping, and it's 1.2 millimeters. That's tiny. That's tiny. But what it is, the idea is square and should be evenly shaped. Once again, I told you in class, I really don't care about sizes. I'm not going to take out a rule and go, oh, that's 1.5 millimeters. Good job. No. What I'm looking for is a small, fine dice. And once again, if you get that skill down, then you can start getting larger and smaller. It's easy enough. Okay. Chopped and chopped. We talked about this earlier. I'll give you a second to write that down and pause it. And back again. Okay. Chop parsley. You can chop onions. You can chop garlic. That means just roughly cut. Really, you're not making it into fine dice. You're not brunoising it or anything like that. You're just chopping it finely. Now mincing, once again, is another term for that. Mincing is more of a British term. Mincing and chop basically mean the same thing, but some chefs will say mincing is smaller. Okay. Once again, so you know the difference. In class I always just say chop the onions. If I say chop the onions, that means cut them fine, right? Doesn't mean dice them or anything like that. Just take a knife to them and chop them up. Clarification. To clarify is to make clear, right? We clarify butter. There's two types of roux. Well, there's many types of roux, but the two types in classical French cooking, right? You have a whole butter roux, and you have a clarified butter roux. And clarified butter is basically melting the butter, removing the milk solids and fats off the top, and the milk off the bottom. So you just have the oil itself, basically, the oil of the butter. That's used for making roux. Most of the time I do whole butter roux for two things. Whole butter roux taste better. There's much more flavor in the whole butter part. Second problem with whole butter roux, they can burn. They burn easier. A clarified butter will have a higher, what we call smoke point. It will burn, yes, but it won't burn as fast as a whole butter roux. So once again, when we're making roux, sauteing, I usually use clarified butter. I don't use whole butter because that does burn too quickly. Consommé. To clarify a consommé, we made the stock. If we're going to clarify a consommé is basically, you start out with stock with egg whites, ground mirepoix, ground, say, chicken meat. We're doing chicken consommé. You mix that all together, you slowly heat it up, and that will, as that heats up, that draws away all the impurities. It makes it very, very clear. Once again, if we get in class time, you guys have an interest in making consommé, we can make consommé. Making consommé is very high classical French cuisine. Making a clear soup, once again, I was telling you like about bubbles and sugar. Something clear is not magic today, but when classical French cooking started with Escoffier, a clear soup with a rich flavor was kind of magic. So, and it's kind of fun to do, to be honest with you, consommes. They can fail, though, but once again, that's clarification. Coating. Right? To coat something means to cover, like when you put on, before you go out, you put on your coat, right? Coating is the verb to do. So a coating of bangaru, breadcrumbs, breading coating, okay? That type of thing. Coating could be almost just about anything. You coat with herbs, things like that. Combination cooking methods, okay? Let's get to here. Let's freeze it for a second. And freeze. And back again. Okay. I hope so. Hope you're back. Hope you're writing this down because it's part of your notebooks when it's in. This is your homework. Once again, I want you guys to have a complete notebook. And I'm giving to you this in Korean, not so you become dependent on it, but so you can get a good understanding. Because if we're in class, it's a lot easier. So that's why I made this up. For the cyber class alone, I don't generally use this because of, I want you guys to get a good grasp of English. But you guys study a lot of English anyway, so there's no reason why you can't. Combination cooking method, right? Moist cooking method plus a dry one, right? Once again, when we get into classrooms, we'll talk more about cooking methods, and every cooking method is wet and dry and combination. There's 3 classifications. Obviously, blanching is wet, baking is dry, sauté is dry, grilling is dry, poaching is wet. Don't worry about it. I know it's a lot of information. We went over a lot of information. We'll get more into that when we get cooking. That's for sure. It makes more sense. We talked about combined. Combined is a gentle mix. Okay. Some recipes say combined, some say mix, but if it says combined, that means you're not going to be whipping this in. You're going to be just putting it together. There's another term, folding, too, which we could talk about, especially in the bakery. Decant. To decant is to pour off. The best example I can think of, if you cook shellfish, joke, hongap, mussels, clams, if you cook that in liquid and you cook them and they open up and then you cool it off, on the bottom you're going to see a lot of sand, things like that, right? You don't want to put that into your sauce or into your soup or into your pasta, whatever you're going to use it for. So you're going to decant off the broth by slowly pouring it off, leaving it on the bottom. You can do it with red wines too. A good red wine will have some residual on the bottom, which you're going to have to decant because you don't want to drink it. That's used a lot in red wines for sure. Deglaze, once again, to deglaze is to add a liquid after you sweat something or you saute something. So you could sweat with stocks. Most likely, you can deglaze with stocks. That's the most common thing. But you can use water, vegetable juice, apple juice, or something like that, depending on the recipe. Water, yeah, you can use it. Whiskey, beer, any kind of liquid you can use to deglaze with. Now, I don't think you would deglaze, like, say, if you're doing like fusion, you wouldn't deglaze with, like, say, something like soy sauce because there's salt content. You're way too salty. Maybe if you mix soy sauce with water, because once again, deglaze is a hot pan. You pour it in, it comes down. You're not flambeing when you deglaze. You can if you use whiskeys or any high alcohol type of thing, but you don't want it so hot that you pour in chicken stock and it boils over, it steams over. Once again, with alcohol, it will burn. Wine will burn, but it takes a lot to burn wine because it's only 14%. 12 to 14%. Soju is great for when I use fusion cooking. I use that a lot for deglazing. Plus, you get a nice flambe. You get a nice little fire from soju. Okay, moving on. Keep going. Dice. Okay, what we're going to do now, we're going to take a break. I'm going to play a video for you, and I want you to hear the languages. This one is a Chinese student, and we're making some Chinese food, but we're talking in English. I want you to hear the accents. It's very important because you guys are very much used to an American accent. Okay?